Hey, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hey, what's going on?
Not much, man. Sorry. My thing is
You're okay. You got your whole place decked out. Look at you. Look at that. What is that? 4 monitors?
three. I have three computer monitors and then
Oh wow.
my
Okay.
work laptop.
Nice. Are you working from home?
Yeah, full time.
Sick, sick. Are you in Wyoming or where are you at?
No, I live in Denver and I just work remote.
That's awesome. Heck yeah. How's life been though?
Couldn't complain, man. It's been pretty good.
Nice. Heck yeah. Yeah, thanks for jumping in, man. I know you're a busy guy, so I appreciate you spending some time here. But
Oh no, you're
really wanted to reconnect here too, so that's awesome. But yeah, so you'll see. I'm not sure if you're seeing the same screen I am, but um, there's comments going to be on the right side, and then it might be delayed by like maybe 30 or 40 seconds. But yeah, I just wanted to like kick off this podcast, kind of like get to know all these software engineers that are in this space that come from boot camps, especially, and then
Mhm.
kind of tell the story. So I thought you'd be the first perfect guest for that, since we both pretty much went to the same school, same company, and went the same direction as well. So that's
I
awesome.
know it's kind of funny, right?
No, it really
Like
is.
we same college, same company that we worked at, and then we both went to the same like coding boot camp,
Yeah.
and then we all managed to get jobs right afterwards. So it's like it's kind of just an interesting kind of vibe. Also, I gotta ask before, like, is there censorship on this? Like, can I not swear or what's? You
I
have to
mean,
give me all these details, man. I don't know
oh
the
yeah,
rules.
better expose that now. I think I made it age appropriate, but yeah, you can say whatever you want, honestly. But yeah, yeah, whatever you feel like, honestly, you feel like in your heart. So, but
Awesome, man.
yeah, yeah, for sure. But yeah, so the ones that are here, welcome to the podcast, every TED Talk. I'm excited to kind of kick off this podcast with Ryan Choe. I'll be the host, Tony Kim, and then Ryan Choe, software engineer as well. Really, really excited to kick this off with him. Episode one, kind of have him tell his story, and then I'll be kind of asking picking his brain on some questions. Oh, yep, Freddie says hello. Nice. He's one of my coworkers. So nice. Heck yeah. Yeah. Give some shout outs out. Yeah. If you guys are behind the curtains, definitely give a shout out if you guys are there. But I'm excited to kick this podcast off. But yeah, so what we're gonna do is like maybe for 40 minutes, kind of have you kind of tell your story. I'm gonna pick your brain a little bit on how you got where you're at, and yeah, so we'll go from there. But yeah, I was kind of curious too. I know you've asked me. I think you graduated right after me. When did you go to Flatiron School?
I went to Flatiron right around Thanksgiving of 2020.
Okay.
So, yeah, so basically it was, I mean, like, I guess the audience might not know, but like me and you know. So basically, I worked at Halliburton with Tony. We had a very similar story, upbringing. So we
That's
went
right.
to the same college, majored in the same thing. Then we got hired right out of college at the same company, and then got laid off around the same time. And then went to go to Flatiron's boot camp. So yeah, basically this all kind of started with the oil market and COVID kind of all tanking
Yeah.
in 2020. Markets just crashed, oil went negative, and I was like barely hanging in there until like about around April and May, and then oil went to like negative $48 a barrel,
I
which is
know.
like which isn't crazy to think about. People just wanted them like to sell their own oil that they had because no one would want it.
I know.
So
Like,
basically, we got shut out, man. It was like, although it was good timing, I would say. Like, I
yeah.
think it was a blessing in disguise overall.
You know, I can't lie. I totally agree with you. Like, if it wasn't for COVID, I think we were going to be in the same spot as we were. So, I mean, that's a blessing in disguise, right? Black swan event, I call it. So,
Right? But at the same time, though, like I realized we were working on a project where it was kind of like, oh, let's kind of program this thing so engineers don't have to be out on the field at all the time.
Yeah.
And I started realizing like I'm basically working on a project to put myself out of work at this point.
No.
And so like it was inevitable, right?
Yeah. No, it was bound to happen. I was not surprised when I got my call. So so funny enough, today marks when I actually got laid off in 2020. Funny enough, I swear it's not coincidence, but this was the same exact day in 2020 I got laid off. And so that's really funny how that worked out. So
That's crazy. 2 years later, we're here now.
yeah,
Yeah, I think
no,
I got
fun.
laid off May 17th. So
Okay.
that'll be my 2-year
Oh
anniversary.
man, you got a month ahead of me. Nice. That's awesome.
I think it balanced out because we were already like short on staff, and they're just like, "All right, who do we cut next?" It's like, I don't know. Let's just wait until everybody gets back. But yeah, so it was just definitely the biggest blessing in disguise ever.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah, so after that, I kind of went on my little early retirement tour, right? Because I was like, oh yeah, I got out of the Red Devil, and I'm just like, let's go have fun, experience life, go golf every day, and just kind of enjoy like a vacation that was well deserved. I
Yeah,
mean, the field work was intense, like, and that's why I really enjoyed like coding now, and because like I enjoy actually programming
yeah,
rather than like back then where it was like, oh yeah, I'm in it because like I'm waiting for the next career step, right?
yeah.
I paid my dues working at like a service company. And then one day I might work for a big company like BP, Shell, Chevron, right?
Sure.
And we were just waiting for that time. But, like I was at that point of kind of like exhaustion where I was just like, I don't know how many more hours I can work in a day to like, and not get exhausted
Yeah,
and kill myself later on, right? It was just like, it was hazardous for our health.
I agree. So would you say like coding has pretty much completely flipped your life 180? It sounds like that's kind of what you're making it sound like.
Yes. I feel like programming, coding, like it has pushed me to the point, like to a new direction in life where I'm actually more cognizant of like my well-being, and I enjoy the work that I do. Like it's frustrating. Coding is also one of the most like love-hate relationships because like
Yeah.
when it works out and you're just like, yes, it worked. But at the same time, you're just looking at it and it's just like you hit one bug and you stare at the same code. And like I swear to God, I misspelled one of my variables that I was
Oh,
sharing.
sure.
And I was staring at the screen for like 30 hours, and then I finally had to ask the coworkers, like, "Hey, can you look at this? I have no idea what's going on." And then he's like, "Dude, you misspelled that." I was like,
Oh my god,
all right." So
man,
it's one of those love hates, man.
yeah, it's the little things in life that get you right. Semicolons. I mean, those
Oh,
things are there's gonna get you for sure. But yeah, I'm interested to know. Like, so you went to Flatiron School. How was your experience in that? Like, did you enjoy it?
I have mixed feelings. It's kind of,
Yeah.
I definitely so the I want to start with the pros. The pros is definitely the instructors were very friendly. Um, and it was kind of a very smooth transition into programming. I think that it taught me a lot as a programmer on the importance of learning how to Google things, right? And basically actually getting down and dirty and actually coding every day, right? Because like I did graduate with a comp sci degree, so I can't tell the story on that. But like from what I hear a lot is that people that graduate the comp sci don't nearly code as much as a boot camp makes you code. So there is that kind of difference that I really did appreciate. It was like I was immediately immersed into coding every single day and figuring it out. And so I really loved it. I loved the process of kind of like the speed of it because it was really work at your own pace, right? Like they have these like building blocks and working schedules and like when you have to present projects and stuff. But at the grand scheme of things, it's always working at your own pace. Like if you didn't feel comfortable with like the competencies for that building block, then you could just say, hey, like I don't feel comfortable. I want to kind of take a step back and redo it. But I just enjoy like having a person that I could ask the most dumb questions to all the time and getting a good answer, and they're just like, nah, you're good, man. Because like when you get to a workplace, I'm not gonna lie, people are always down to help you, even when
Yeah.
like there is no such thing as a dumb or stupid question to ask. There's just kind of like ignorant questions to ask because you could always Google it, right? But it's always like I always have that fear of kind of like approaching coworkers with because like I don't want to get judged because like if I ask like a very dumb question, it's like, oh yeah, like he doesn't really know what he's doing. But like no one thinks that, right? It's just like one of those self things that's in the back of my head that I'm just like doubting myself. But yeah, like I love the instructors. I love kind of the pace of work and like how I could study as much as I want and learn new things. And I could ask somebody about it. How do you do hello? I mean, it depends on the language, right?
Yeah. Speaking of which, what are you coding in now? Like, what is your technology stack that you're working with?
The technology stack that I'm working with currently at my job is Angular, C Sharp, Python.
Oh, wow. Those are completely whole different, its own little beast, man.
Yeah, it's very interesting because like I don't really touch much of the Python code because so the company I work at, Flowstate Solutions, we do basically pipeline detection, and a lot of the pipeline detection is actually being generated from machine learning and deep learning models.
Mm.
And that's like a whole deep dive that's like data scientists know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm just like, yeah, I've scratched the surface. I get the basis of it, but like I'm not writing the models all the time. But at the same time, we do have the runtime and compile engines, and we have to kind of feed that all through. And we're displaying the Python results back into like our C sharp or into directly into Angular. That's like showing it on a plot or the data, right?
Okay.
So it's like a whole wild beast, but it works, right? It works.
As long as it works, it doesn't even matter what the code looks like, right? So that's awesome.
Right.
Um,
The first step is to always get it to work, and then the second step is let's fix the code that you just wrote.
yeah. Hey, story of my life, man. Story of my life. Do you feel like you've carried a lot of your knowledge from the past job over to this one, or do you feel like it's completely new, or how do you feel?
I I don't know. So that's a very difficult question because like I can't tell you exactly what I've learned from my last job,
Yeah.
but like I would say like college definitely kind of trained my thought process. Like
Okay.
the way like at Mines they train everybody is to be very logical, and that comes in the most handy when like you're programming because you have to be the most logical and thought like process laid out person. So it really like kind of generated that kind of thought process for me. So it like I could be a lot of times before I actually start coding, I think through everything that I need to do in my head and write it down, and then I'm like, all right, let's start this. And then obviously I'll always miss a few things, right? But like I'll go through that kind of iterative process, like, all right, so I did this and this is where I hit a wall. So that's kind of like I think just being exposed to a very logical and process driven thought process has definitely transferred over from college and the
Mhm.
last job to software engineering.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I will say, like, just in general, college, you really don't carry a lot of stuff. Well, I don't know, but like, at least for our major, like, I felt like we don't apply anything that we learned, like maybe 1% of it. Like, Excel is like what we've been taught, right? And so, I honestly felt like that's all we knew. And so that's kind of our world. But it's honestly, I was like, wow, VBA. That's VBA is like people make fun of me for like it's not really coding, but it is what it is. But I'm sure comp sci, if there's any comp sci majors here, I'm sure their curriculum is definitely more useful. Um, I don't know that aspect of it, but I'm curious to know what that is. But I agree, they just teach you how to problem solve, which is very applicable
Mhm.
to everything, right? So
Right. And like when we graduate, the key thing that they always say was like, oh yeah, your degree doesn't mean anything. It just shows people that you know how to learn.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But
So
speaking of your retirement, though, I also had an early retirement. I retired for about 3 months before getting back to the workforce. I'll be honest, I kind of liked it. Like the retirement was kind of nice. I was like, huh, I could do this for quite a bit. I'm not sure what people were talking about, but How long did it take you from graduation to finding how did you even find this job? Like what's the timeline for that, like, of the process?
Sweet. Yeah. So I graduated Flatiron School in April, I believe. So basically a year ago from now.
Okay.
Yeah, because we had this weird schedule. Usually it's 15 weeks, but I literally joined in on Thanksgiving and then Christmas. And so it was just like there was just a wild span of just holiday breaks. So yeah, I graduated in April, and then I reached I kind of spammed the world that I graduated, right? And then I was just hitting up everybody that I knew in the tech industry and getting hints and pointers, basically like, hey, like I just graduated from this boot camp, like do you have any jobs that are open? And then they're like, yeah, we do have openings. And then they'll ask me a series of questions, and then they're like, we don't think you're experienced enough for this position. So I was like, oh yeah, okay. Like it gave me a list of things to learn, right? Like
Yeah.
I would say like rejection from any interview early from graduation is just a very good thing, because it teaches you and shows you where you're lacking in certain areas, and
Mhm.
that's where you could really brush up on and basically ace the next interviews, right? So it's always just kind of the iterative process of kind of going through interviews. If you don't get it, you don't get it. There's like I think I did a Google check like the other day for how many like software engineering jobs there were in just Denver, and there's like 900. So it was just like there's always opportunity, and like just because you fail, it just gives you a better overlook of what you can work on to make yourself look better for the next person. And who knows, that next job might be actually like higher paying, better incentives, or something that you really enjoy doing. But yeah, so I went from graduating Flatirons to getting my. So I reached out to one of my old college friends who
Sure.
also did a weird career shift. He was a mechanical engineer, and then shout out to Brayton, Brayton Sanders. But yeah, so I hit him up. He went to from like mechanical engineering. He got his MBA at University of Wyoming, and then he landed a job as a data scientist, right? Crazy. He has a crazy story too, so it's interesting. But he started working at Flowstate Solutions. We're a startup company too. So,
Okay.
and he was like, "Hey, we're like hiring interns for this summer. Like, it'll be a good opportunity to get your foot in the door." So I was just like, "Dude, I'm down. It's paying. It's gonna pay some of the bills, and I'm like, I'm down for just the experience, to put on a resume, and put my foot in the door in the tech industry." And so a lot of that summer, it was a lot of kind of SQL. So I was doing, there was a data visualization software. It's kind of like Power BI, but it's
Sure.
called Grafana. And so basically it's just a data visualization. You write SQL code and queries in, and then it'll just kind of display that information. So a lot of that summer, I did a deep dive into SQL, which was awesome because I never really paid attention to SQL. Like, yeah, I could do basic queries, but like I wasn't ever getting into the complex side of SQL where you're doing joins, inner joins, and then all sorts of joins with all sorts of different searches through a JSON
Yeah.
inside of a yeah. So it was super cool, and so it gave me a lot of great skills. Yeah, Grafana is a whole beast of itself too. So it's like I'm kind of glad that I kind of stepped out of that. But like, so that summer I kind of did that, and then they were seeing like, oh yeah, like he can kind of take on what we throw on him. So like they started giving me kind of more of like actual coding projects to work on. And so I think one of the first projects, and this was right before I got my full-time offer, was literally, hey, can you start like we have this PDF file of a map that all our users see when they log in. It's like, can we integrate some kind of map, like a live map that kind of that's a little bit more appealing, right, to the
Okay.
user? And so that was my whole task. And so I had to go into Azure Maps, and that's what I integrated into it. And so that was kind of like my whole first experience in the workforce of using an SDK and implementing it into our software. And that was really fun too. And then I also had all these like auxiliary tasks of kind of like, hey, can you update all our packages? Because like some of the packages we were like, it was like nodes on version 15 and we were just on 10. And so like it wasn't like, it was kind of just one of those things where it was just kind of like small team and we're working fast and we just kind of were shorthanded. So yeah, and then I got my full-time offer, and then I actually got offered as a QA analyst.
Okay.
Which is funny to say because like if you start working at a startup, you realize titles don't really mean anything.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things.
All trades, right?
Yeah, it's basically just like, hey, you're part of the team now. Like, it's just a title. We're gonna give you everything that we need to do.
Yeah.
So, but it was the most fun process. And if you ever have like, if you want, I would say like, if you want to learn a lot at a very fast pace, startups are great. Like, they literally at the fastest growth, and they're building so fast that you learn and you're exposed to so many different technologies.
Yeah.
And and I think that's the part of coding that I really enjoy is like, I hate kind of being stuck in the same cycle of things. And I think that's what I figured out at our last job was doing the same repetitive task, but a different location or a different like set of data, like day in and day out. That was kind of what drove me crazy. And it was just kind of like sucked the life out of me.
Sure.
And with coding, you're just always learning, which is also when I always get imposter syndrome now.
Yeah.
And it's like a living coping mechanism I have to deal with is just like, hey, yeah, I don't know anything. It's like, no, you're all right. And it's like, you have to have like that inner talk with yourself because like imposter syndrome hits me like probably like once every week where I'm just like, why did I choose this again? It's like, I don't know anything. I don't know how I have to do, like, sometimes I'm like, how do I even console log this properly now? It's just like, why isn't the console log working? And just like, it's kind of one of those things. But yeah, I really enjoy kind of joining the startup life and just working fast because at our last job, we kind of had that kind of work process where I enjoy, it sounds kind of weird, like kind of like a sadistic person, but like I love the process of burning out. It sounds super weird, but I love that process. Like I love the process to getting burnt out, but not getting burnt out.
Okay.
Because like you hit that kind of stride in the whole burning out process where you're just like going at it and you like everything is clicking, all the cogs in your head is in your brain are just clicking and just like 100%, like 120% like drive, right? But and then you get burnt out. So that's never a good thing. But like, right, I'm kind of like zoning in on like, if I just focus on doing like the build up to getting burnt out, and then I just take like a half day break to just kind of not look at code, like I could just jump back into that cycle. Do you feel like startup world is more stressful than other companies? That is an interesting question. I don't have a lot of experience with that. Flowstate Solutions is my first company. But I do feel like with a startup, it can be more stressful because everybody is kind of doing their own thing. You're tasked with a solo project. You're not like at Google or Apple or Microsoft or any like mid to bigger tier companies. I feel like they always have project teams. So you guys are working collaboratively on the same goal, on the same code base, and you're working towards that, and you could PR and then you could peer and then get that all checked and pushed up, right? In our I can only speak for our startup, but it's very hard to do that kind of process with a small team because you're trying to build so fast that you're pushing code up and only the dev lead is really checking it. Yeah. And everybody's kind of doing it at the same time, right? Yeah. So like I'm working on a feature branch, my coworker might be working on a feature branch, and my other coworker will be working on another feature branch. Yeah. And then there might be a security update too, right? And so like all of those get merged into one master, right, at the end. And that's where it kind of gets stressful, is because you start seeing code that gets merged in all of a sudden that you've never even seen before. You don't even understand what happened, yeah. Right? So I would say that's stressful, but you get used to it. And that kind of makes you a better programmer too, because you start being able to read other people's code. And it really helps you out because it kind of shows like their thought process.
Sure.
And with coding, there's never a right answer. So it's always cool to see someone else's answer to a problem and then be like, oh yeah, I never even thought of it that way, right? Because I feel like a lot of us have our own thought process and we can't really break out of it until you see somebody else's work. And it kind of just shows you more approaches to the problem, right? And a lot of people with more experience, your code that might have been like 3-4 extra lines, they shortened it down like by 6 or 7, but because they used a special method, right? So it's really, I would say it's stressful, but it's also kind of that's why the learning curve is kind of like steep, but it's great, right? High risk, high reward, but there's not a lot of risk. I won't say it's high risk, high reward. Low risk, high reward. Just kind of high stress, high reward. There it is.
You love that. It sounds like you love that kind of environment. You like, because I mean, obviously coming from Halliburton, you know the whole experience. Like people that don't know, you know, like we worked a shift schedule, like maybe what was it, 14, 10-hour days, like window. Yeah, it was, and then also like just a lot of stuff happening, but but yeah, I can definitely relate to that question about startups because my first job, I don't know if you knew, but my first job was actually, I'm in Dallas. So was in person at a startup and I was a Node.js backend engineer. And I loved it. I definitely will say I learned so much about everything like Kubernetes, microservices, pretty much everything but like AWS. But yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Like startups, I even tell like a lot of my mentees all the time, like if you want to grow, you definitely want to probably shoot for a startup. It probably won't pay as much, but I think I even said this, like don't chase the money, like just go after the experience first because then the money will follow, right? Um, but yeah, I'm at Southwest, but definitely different vibe. But definitely enjoy it more now because I wanted some flexibility with my work environment. Because I'm sure remote has changed your life. Do you prefer that, or do you like being in person?
So I have mixed feelings about remote. There are times where like it'd be so much easier if I was in person to like walk over to a coworker and be like, "Hey man, like what's going on with this code? I have no idea what's this errors popping up. Like I just
Yeah.
got this random error." And it's just like you go through the log files and it's still like I still don't get it. And so like at the end of the day, I like working by myself because it pushes me to be a better programmer because like I am solely responsible for solving my problems, which makes me better at Googling, first of all.
Yeah.
And then better, like, even like you'll encounter times where Stack Overflow doesn't have the answer that you need, which is rare, but you do run into that. But
Yeah.
I would say being able to work through my own problems without kind of getting secondary eyes on it kind of
Mhm.
makes me think a little better and faster on my feet
Yeah.
and program a lot more smoother. So like I know
Oh,
what will work and won't work. So like remote work has improved me as a programmer, but I do miss the social aspect of it. Like
yeah.
I really do like miss kind of having those interactions. But then again, like I don't want to interact with people every day. So I'm kind of just like, you know what? I think I'll choose remote. Like a hybrid seems nice too, but like I still don't want to travel. Like I enjoy walking out of like getting out of bed, taking a shower, and walking over to my computer, drinking coffee, and just looking at my
It's a
computer
luxury.
and like, all right, let's go.
Yeah, it's a luxury, I think. So have you met any of your teammates before, or like do you ever go back up to Cal? I'm guessing that's where the headquarters at for your company, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, my company is based out of Casper, and um, it's funny. Like, sorry, it's very funny because when I got laid off by Halliburton, I told myself I'll never work for an oil company again. But like, technically, I am working for an oil company, so it's kind of
Yeah.
weird that way. But yeah, so they're based out in Casper. I go up there. We have basically quarterly meetings
Mm.
and biannual meetings, and those are kind of like required, just because it's kind of a 4 hour drive, and I drive up like 5 o'clock in the morning, get there around like 9 or 10.
Okay.
But like we're used to that, right? Like because of our last job, like we used to wake up at like 3 in the morning just to
Yeah.
drive 4 hours and then start a
Yeah.
12-hour shift and then do that and drive back, right? So I don't mind the 4 hour drive. I'm just like, yeah, this is fine. Like I'm getting paid either way, and then like I get to interact and sit in a meeting. But like, yeah, like I met my teammates and the whole team basically. I would say a few times, probably like about
Okay.
5 or 6 times. Um, well, I've gone up 5 or 6 times, and sometimes I stay for multiple days, so it kind of changes. And then I'm planning on like going up more during the summer now that the weather's better, and then kind of just engage with the team a little bit more, because there are those things that I will say is not really present. If you work remote, you kind of miss out on those kind of small things with interactions with your teammates and getting closer to them, and it kind of takes off the I want to say what kind of how like you approach them, right? You're not as friendly, and they're not like, because you don't have that interaction in person, right?
Yeah.
And Slack, you can like Slack message all day and send all
Yeah.
these gifts, but like it's not the same, right? But so I see them a decent amount of times throughout the year.
Oh, awesome. One thing I will say though, just like funny enough, like my first job was also at a startup, so it's like almost like we're both on the same track, same school, same job, same company, same boot camp, pretty much same industry, kind of startup vibe. One thing I'll definitely mention. So you've been there for about a year now, right?
Yeah.
I will say that startups, even if you don't realize it, but it'll start kicking in, I think. But I started getting an itch for like entrepreneurship a little bit when I was there at my startup. It kind of inspired me to kind of like, hey, like if they can do it, like what can I build or something? Obviously, it's a lot of roadblocks around the head, but have you ever thought about that? Like, oh, I want to build something of my own, maybe have my own control or something, running my own business. Like, has that ever come to your mind? Just working there. You have all the tool sets.
Oh,
You know how to code. You're from School of Mines. Like, I want to
dude,
know.
I so like this is where like it's not really a creative block. It's the opposite of a creative block. I have too many ideas where I just like overload myself, and then I'm just like, well, I could do this, but because like I started a company with a few of my friends from college, and it's kind of like an
Okay.
investment company. And so I started thinking, it's like, what if I can beat the market, right? What if I applied machine learning, AI, deep learning with the stock market and the news and the government, like Congress people and Senate people, their investments, and it kind of tracked that, right?
Okay.
And so like I started thinking about that. I was like, but like if I started like, and then I started thinking like, yeah, but I could also go into like Web3 now, because I really want to kind of dabble into the Web3 world. So it's just like there's so many different opportunities where I'm just like at I create my own creative block because I'm just like overwhelmed with all these ideas. So no, I completely get that, because just watching like the startup vibe, and like I actually helped out with another startup that someone approached me with,
Oh wow.
and so I was just dabbling in that. I wasn't really getting paid or anything. I was just kind of like giving like a consultant basically for them, and kind of just writing code for them in Flutter and JavaScript and React. But yeah, it just like it opened a lot of my eyes, like my eyes to a lot of different opportunities in this world. And I don't know, I feel like there's a dangerous aspect to that, because I don't want to dabble in something that can possibly infringe on another company. And so those are the things that I don't want to really do, right? Because I don't know all the patents that are out there. I don't know what technology is like I can't be using and like trying to mimic. And so I kind of got scared at that, because so one of the people that I was helping out, he said that he was saying that he actually got sued by a bigger company because
Wow.
of his idea, and like he started coding, and the code is very similar to their code,
Really?
but like he didn't even know that company existed or used that code.
Sure.
So it was very interesting, right? And so like that opened to my eyes to like, hey, there's a lot of opportunities, but there's also some risk. But like I would say the risk is minimal. But no, I would love to do a startup venture, but I just don't feel like I have the time to really do that right now. Because like I want to work on, I have so many different like technologies that I want to learn right now, and like I said, Web3 is one of the ones that I'm very interested in. But no, like I'm just kind of even going. I went through my portfolio once you kind of asked me to join this podcast, and I started looking, and I was like, man, I haven't really touched my own projects
Yeah.
since I started working at a startup. Because like you know the vibe when you start out at work at a startup, like you're like coding for like 9-10 hours and you don't even know it, and then you
Right.
just kind of like sit down and you're like, all right, I'm not gonna code on, like I'm not gonna work on my
Uh-huh.
project right now. And so that's kind of what happened to me now. And like you hit me up and I was like, I don't think I have anything on my portfolio that is up to date that displays what I can do. So like
Yeah.
I'm at like before this meeting, I started like going through iTerm and I was like, all right, what are these projects and how can I do them even better?
Yeah.
And so like I think that's my goal. And then kind of just I would like to do a paid like subscription based kind of business venture, but I really do like the whole idea of tech being very open source. So that's kind of one of the things that I'm trying to lean to.
Yeah, I'm not trying to copycat you, but I like where you're heading, and if you ever do want to collaborate, just let me know. I'm always about like trying to start something new. So one thing I've learned, and like I don't want to sound like I'm like I mean we're both the same age, we're both 27, right? But I totally agree with like all the fear and the risk, but man, like at what point at least for me, like when I started at Southwest, one thing I realized is like I started traveling a lot. Like every other weekend I would go travel. I'll be in Miami next week, like just started traveling. I never did that like before joining Southwest. And that gave me an open eye and saying like I want to live my life without regrets. Like when I'm 80, like I don't want to say, wow, I really wish I'd done this. Like, and so I'm always looking for opportunities where I'm like, if you have a good idea, like, I mean, like, I know it's gonna be busy with full-time work, but yeah, definitely, yeah, let me know, keep me in the loop for sure. I'm always about innovating ideas. So
Hey man, vice versa too, man. Like if you
yeah,
have any good ideas and projects, I'm always down
I
to
do.
hop
I
on
have a
them.
couple. I'm just trying to find. So all I really know is like engineers. Engineers are great at like building things, but like for me, at least for my lack of resources, like knowing people like that know how to sell is my thing. Because one of the companies I'm really invested in is like called Palantir, part of the whole meme stock thing. I lost a ton of money in that. Like I didn't invest in GameStop, but like I invested a lot of money in this company called Palantir, and I was literally a sucker for it. But yeah, like yeah, just be able to like create an idea. I also have a lot of ideas, but they know how to build a product, but they're lacking in like how to sell that product. And so, yeah, if you have any good ideas that you want to exchange, for sure, like I'll love to collaborate. And if there's other like devs that you know, like that's I definitely have enjoyment like outside. I like to code outside of work too, so for like personal enjoyment, not for like because I hate my life or anything. So.
I agree with you on that. Like I well, we're going back, but like now I'm kind of like I was in that process of like just being very full-time work and kind of getting into my own groove at a startup. And now I feel very comfortable at a startup with the pace of work, the turnaround, quick turnarounds, very fast sprints. And so I got accustomed to that. So now my eyes are kind of more open towards like, I can start actually working on projects that I want to do too.
Yeah.
And so I think I hit that realization like a week or two ago. And like, I'm starting to learn, like read into new technologies and documentation for that and seeing like, all right, like what can I actually do with this now?
Yeah.
And so like, I personally would love to collaborate because like the technologies that you worked with are very different from mine, like the tech stack I've worked with. And like, I don't have much experience with Kubernetes or AWS cloud.
Sure.
And it's very interesting how that all works because our company uses Redis and they use Octopus to deploy. We use like, and like Azure
Okay.
DevOps to do like a bunch of things. Like it's spread out. So like I got exposed to a lot of different technologies, but at the same time, just like, oh man, jack of all trades, but master of none, right? But that's not even how the saying goes, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, jack of all trades, but master of none. It's like it's still better to be like have multiple skills than nothing, right?
Yeah.
But I thoroughly do enjoy coding now, and like you kind of like this podcast kind of inspired me to like look
Nice.
back and be like, hey man, like I should start working on some more personal projects. Like sometimes like I end the day at work and like, oh man, I don't even want to look at another C# code. Like I don't even, like, where am I going to use C# that next, right? It's like, am I going to work on a video game? Like, should I learn Unity at this point?
Yeah.
But no, like I see a bunch of opportunities and like things that like in daily life daily life that I see, like, hey, I could probably automate that. Like, why I left the stove on, I should probably automate something that will tell me like, hey, your stove's on and you
I
drove
didn't
off.
think about that. Yeah, like that's my always
Right?
biggest like worries. Like when I leave for a flight, like did I turn my stove off?
Dude,
Like,
and you actually checked right before you left, and
I
then you're driving and you're like,
check.
did I really check though?
Like I quadruple. I'm insane. I will quadruple like check maybe 10 times because yeah, like I actually didn't even think about that. Like, but like that's so smart. Like I'm like wow, like there's got to be an app for like just turning on and off a stove. Like as
Right?
simple as it sounds.
They got smart stoves, right? They have like LED panels built into it and everything, and like they have like basically a computer in their stove now that shows like it can even do like I saw like a microwave or a refrigerator that has the internet and Netflix that you can watch off the
You can watch
refrigerator.
Netflix from the fridge.
Yeah. So like
Oh,
when you're cooking, you can watch Netflix on your fridge. I was like, when is that very applicable? But like, okay, I get it. It's a very
man,
niche thing.
yeah.
Um, but like, yeah, like there's all sorts of those kind of. I feel like with tech advancing so much, there's so many different ways you can utilize it, and
Yeah.
that's where I'm just like, yeah, we got smart light bulbs. What else can be smart in my house? But then I have like this giant fear of like, what if this becomes like iRobot and like it's just like, yeah, it's like one of those things that my mind just drifts off into. It's like,
Yeah.
what if my stove wants to kill me one day and just like turn it on like rampant, right?
Eventually, we'll get
But
there. I mean, Tesla is building a what is it called, a smart bot or something, where they're building a smart human, essentially. So
yeah,
it's coming. So it's just a matter of time. I mean, yeah, like it's so funny. Like there's only going to be more and more need for software developers. That's why I feel like even now, like you probably know this, but so on my free time, besides trying to spin this up as like a successful podcast, I also volunteer like mentoring, like bringing these. So have you ever used like those what's called Skilled? So it's
no,
like
I haven't.
so it's just volunteering and helping out bootcamp grads that are trying to find jobs, but there's just more influx of these boot campers, and I think even our company, I think they made a position where you don't have to have a college degree and you can get a job as like a software developer thing. So I think it's just the ball's just started to roll, you know, with like this technology space. Code specifically, COVID was weird. That's when a lot of people changed their jobs. I'm sure you know that from you and I. More specifically, technology. They realized, hey, I want the luxury to work from my house. I want to build something, but also I feel like no matter what, like even if you're a HR or some kind of analyst, I feel like in the future you have to understand code. Like that's kind of like given. um, I know in elementary school now they're teaching kids how to code, which is insane. Like that's part of their curriculum now. So
I swear, if a sixth grader comes up to me and they code better than me, I'm just gonna be like, all right,
I know
well,
it's not your PR doc. No, it needs work or something.
oh, you just do a harsh,
Shut down.
harsh
Yeah.
review on it.
Why didn't you
No,
just
but
this way?
why didn't you use this method? Like, explain your thought. That's not how you should flatten something. And it's like, but no, I completely agree. And I think one of the big things that we as programmers should kind of strive for is kind of make our code more readable
Yeah.
for people. I'm realizing this now because there's a lot of people that's going to be a part of your team, right? And not just, I'm not talking about your software team, but like I'm talking
Mhm.
about your sales team
Mhm.
or your marketing team. If they had to look like, I think it's also very crucial for those people to understand how the code works because they can't just go out and try to sell a product and their answer is like, let me ask a software dev for you or software engineer team for
That's
that.
a good
And they'll
point.
give you,
Good point.
you know,
Very good
Because
point.
like if they actually understand and make it have a basic concept of it, they could obviously give them an answer right on the spot, which I think does a lot for customer relations, because then it minimizes the number of emails, the number of like time, like the time consumption from customer to the actual seller, right? And so I think that's a very big thing too. And I love interacting with people. I'm very extroverted, but like when I work from home, I'm very introverted. Like, the outside, the sun burns. But when I'm out and about, I'm very out and about.
Yeah.
I'm a very colorful person. So like, I love those interactions. And I was kind of like at Halliburton at the last kind of end of my life there. I was kind of the customer, like the local account rep, right? Because I was the one that the customers were talking to. I go to those meetings and then I have to give like a weekly presentation. But at the same time, like that kind of drove me to to knowing that it's important for whoever's presenting and trying to sell you something, they should know everything about it. And so I think that's why as programmers, like a lot of times I see very generic variable names, which is kind of like, yeah, like I can read that. Like other programmers can read that. But at the same time, it's like, if you were going to throw a new person on this, would they be able to read this? Right.
Oh man, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that. That's a really, really good point. I mean, actually, I'm gonna bring that up even at my company, like in one of these stand-ups. Actually, you're right, because like when you're selling a product, you shouldn't, like, unless it's like super technical, like some random regex or something, like, oh yeah, I don't expect them to know it, but like at least know like how it works, like at least have like a general code knowledge of understanding how that works. That's a good point, because I'm still like in that learning opportunity to learn as much as I can. And I swear naming it's the hardest part of coding, at least for me. I felt like naming thing is so tricky. Like I spend too much time on it. Like, I'll be honest. And for all the people that are coming into this industry, like coding itself, I don't think is hard, but it's the freaking naming. Like yeah, at least for me, like that's like, it takes time, I think.
I definitely agree with you. So I'm on the opposite spectrum. Like things are very easy for me to name. It's just my variable names get too long at that point. I'm too descriptive. So it's one of those issues, right? So like I'm like, yeah, but if I shorten it, will they really understand what that like the acronym for that is? Like they're not acronyms, but I'm like shortening words down, right? Like just skipping letters out. But like I feel like the biggest point for me was just like, yeah, like I don't want to be called into a meeting for them to simply ask me a very like easy answer that like can be directly like answered if you just take a look at the code real quick. And so that's kind of where like I kind of lean towards is like there's going to be a lot more integration in the future between the entity of a company and the software they use, because the product that a lot of companies sell is their software. And the software basically makes everything work. Southwest, like you're coding things for airplanes to use, which is directly marketing to like you could sell that software to other airplane companies, right? So like I think it's very good, and for us to be able to make our code very eligible and readable for a general purpose. But I also like you said, coding is not very like hard, right? It's kind of very intuitive. Like if you look at all our like generic methods that it comes with a language, they're very like, oh, so like I want to sort through all this list. How would I do that? Well, there's a sort method. I want to filter through this. All right, there's a filter method, right? It's very kind of cognizant with how our brain thinks, and that's why it's awesome. Because like I think coding is awesome, is because it was like we as humans make code to like work how we think, right? And so it's kind of very synonymous and like to our daily lives and how we do things. And all you're doing is like, if you had to tell a person that has zero experience what to do, which is basically your script, you're gonna basically write down directions, and that's all it is. And so I started taking that approach to a lot of problems. And so like my girlfriend might hate that because like I'm too logical at some points in my life at this point. It's
Yeah.
just like, well, that doesn't make any logical sense there. It's like, yeah, but you need a little empathy, right? It's like, nah.
Wait,
But
if else, where else can it go? Oh, wait, I don't know. Like your life
right,
situation is just
exactly.
not an if else statement or something, right?
Yeah, I just would rather go with the switch case, right? Just
Yeah.
in this case,
Are you a
if
switch
there
guy
is
or
no case, just
if else
default.
guy? You prefer switches, you're saying?
I think it's applicable in different areas. Like an if else is very concrete. I feel like a switch case is kind of like, yeah, it'll default to something if
Fancy.
there
It's a
is
little
nothing.
fancy. Yeah.
It's a little fancy, but I feel like in the long run, like if else statements are definitely shorter to write than
Yeah.
because you can mash them all up and then they're like, yeah. So it's awesome. I like there's like, and that shows the point of like there's a million different ways to do like to solve one problem, and that's what I enjoy the most about programming.
Nice. I'm gonna ask you a really important question. I'm not sure if you watched Silicon Valley before. Great show. Probably one of the best shows. If you haven't watched it, definitely. It's all code related, but um, are you a tabs guy or are you a space guy? There's only one right
Dude,
answer to this. There's
we
only one
literally had this discussion during our stand up for our tech. Yeah. So we had a talk yesterday in like as the software development team had a talk, and it was talking about tech debt, which is like very crucial to have. It's like you don't want to have too much tech debt and then just ignore it all. But one of the things someone brought up is like, can we please standardize tabs or spaces? And so I am a space guy. I like spaces,
Really?
but I recently switched to tabs because I feel like a majority of the people use tabs. And then my software dev lead actually said something super funny. He was like, "Yeah, it's just like if you use spaces, you just sound super mad all the time. Like if you're spacing like 4 times, you're just smashing that space 4 times." It's like, and I was like, "That is true," but he was like, "But." As like I love spaces stuff. Like his counter argument was like he loves spaces because it takes out his frustration from the code onto
Yeah.
his keyboard. And it's just like an outlet. But yeah, no, I thoroughly like. But it's kind of weird because like VS Code, you can or VS Studio, VS Code, whichever editor you use, you can configure like spaces to be tabs, tabs to be spaces, and so like I use tabs a lot, but they're always configured to 2 spaces. So like
Uh-huh.
I'll tab all the time, but so it's 2 spaces. So in the grand scheme of things, I'm using spaces everywhere.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. No. Definitely. Yeah. It says one of Antonis is one of my coworkers here that says tabs, bro. Tabs all the way. There's no. Yeah. I mean, honestly, there's no right answer. Just wanted to know
I
what your
think
experience was.
the bigger question is how many spaces? Are you a 2 space guy, 4 space guy?
Man, I honestly like so at least in our company we have these like ES linters that like automate the spacing for us, but I prefer 2 spaces. But um
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm very like picky about like the spacing and like how the curly brace. It's like when you have like when you pass in an argument to a function, it's gotta be like there's gotta be space in between those parentheses. If I don't, it bothers me, man. Like I don't know why. Like it's probably not a good sign. Like I might have to like get that checked out, but like it bothers me a lot. So
Dude, that bothers me a lot too. Cause like I see it all the time and it's just like, but then I spend too much time basically re-editing and just putting
yeah,
spaces in. And then later on, like I have a linter too. And I didn't realize that it was my linter and was working with my spaces. And
mm,
I had to make one change on a single file. And it basically changed the entire file because it formatted it completely different. And then and then I got so annoyed at one point because I forgot to put in like git ignore on just like the styling because I wanted to style it just for like my own pleasure to see it. I pushed it up to the main branch and I made it hard. I hard coded that everything is 2 spaces.
oh wow,
And so someone was using 4. So like our C# backend, we convert to 4 spaces.
Okay.
And then in our Angular, it's 2 spaces. And I think it works for C# because it helps out a lot to kind of read through the methods and everything. And then there's the whole like, how should you skip a line if you're doing these? Like, do you skip a line when you put your variable names and then your methods or your statements? Like, I do. I hate squishing everything together. Like, I just think it looks horrible, but yeah. But those are like the small nitpicky things that I understand because like I love 2 spaces and then I see 4 spaces and then like I see the difference because like I open TypeScript files and then I open like C# files at the same time and then I'm just like looking and it's like, oh, this is 2 spaces, that's 4 spaces, and it's just like it throws me off a lot.
So you're a full stack guy too then, right? You're
Yeah.
So do you have a preference? Like, do you prefer front end or do you prefer back end, or do you really don't care on that?
Oh man, I used to love the front end. Like, don't get me wrong, I still love the front end.
Bootcamp sell you on the front end too. Like, that's kind of what my initial goal was, like to get a front end job. That's all that's kind of what they sell you on, right? Like,
yeah, they really do. And I think it's appealing to a lot of new programmers or people that graduated because it's very visual.
mm-hmm.
Like, you don't have to have like a third-party program running in the background to check all your APIs, right?
Yeah.
Are you getting the correct hits? Is it returning the same thing? I just use dev tools and I'm like using the network tab like I shouldn't be. Or there's other, like I use Putty sometimes with the Python to see what that's pushing out. And so like there's a bunch of different, but I don't know. I got like kind of like a slap on the wrist. It wasn't really a slap on the wrist. It was just kind of talking to you. It was just like, hey, bro, let's not put the validations in the front end. Just validate everything in the back end. Because I was doing those things, right? I was just like, you know what? I don't like how it's shooting out this information and like how we can shoot it back to the back end. I'm going to put it in the front end.
Sure.
But they're like, no, we want the front end to be very visual, just kind of passing data and you're displaying it. And all the logic should be in the back end. And that made me go through a deep dive because we use a repository, we use a DTO services controller. So like we use so many different moving parts, and then it's like hard to keep track with such a big project with so many files. It's hard to keep track of everything. And that's part of the tech debt, right? Is cleaning up your back end, cleaning out your front end. And so like I think that I am now more of a back end person. But don't get me wrong, I love the front end. It's just like the first like 8 months that I was working here, like I was very like dominant on the front end where I was like the go-to person for a lot of front end. And then we hired somebody, which is funny because our company's kind of doing this initiative to kind of give bootcamp grads. We hired like a bootcamp grad because it's part of their program to kind of like intern basically, but not like an intern level. It's just kind of like an externship. Basically,
okay.
Where they get the exposure to a company. And so he joined on, and so like a lot of front end work is kind of going to him now. And I'm working on like a lot of the back end stuff, but like I love the back end, but the front end, it's kind of overwhelming when you start styling, because like styling is like the one thing where like my OCD, my like perfectionist come out. I'm just like, no, that's not right. It needs to be 1 more pixel, but then you can't hard code those pixels. So it's like, all right, let's do this %, no rems. And then just like, and then you're trying out all these different things and it just doesn't work out. And you're just like, all right, I'm going to just use like bootstrap material. And it's just like, but then I ran into the issue, same thing. Like if you run into those pre-made kind of like features, you can't style it until you go into like the root of it. And then like that creates a whole new problem on itself. And so like, yeah, like it's a love-hate, but I do love the back end. There's not really a hate relationship with the back end because you're only going to hate the back end if you wrote that code wrong.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of how back end works.
Yeah. You can only blame yourself. No, I'm in the same boat. I started in the back end and I actually prefer working in the back end just because you don't have to worry about like you mentioned, like the whole UI kind of sometimes stresses me out. And there's just so much stuff going on in the front end, I feel like. And then you have to like make sure it's I feel like front end technology runs faster. It just grows faster than the back end. So like React might come up with like the version 20, like 21, 22, and you got to make sure browser compatibility still works. Like it just feels like it's just a marathon compared to the back end. And I prefer to work with data. I think that's fun, but we're like kind of thinking the same. It's like a logical sense. Like if you're logically minded, then the back end's for you. That's why I tell all the people all the time, if you're like that, then back end's for you.
Yeah. I feel like if you really like being creative and you have those kind of eye for design, front end work is great for you then.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times there's no like, we don't have a UX UI designer, right? So a lot of the times it's the programmer, it's me, the developer, that's basically sketching up from like, I don't even make Figma sketches. I literally go into it, the code, make my changes like, how is this? And they're like, we like it. It's like, all right, it's done then. But I would give that advice too to anybody that's starting. It's like how I think you kind of know yourself at the point where you go to a boot camp or you're looking for a new job. You kind of understand yourself a little bit more. I know I learned that I'm a very logical person. I don't like seeing numbers all day. I don't like data a lot because that's what I literally stared at. We stared at Excel spreadsheets with thousands of lines of values every single day of our lives, and I just got exhausted. But now that I'm kind of like working, it's like, yeah, like I could just throw it into a table and then like it'll do its own thing and they'll feed it. So like I enjoy that part. And then I kind of go through and sort through the data and make everything work. But then you kind of work with certain backends where it's just like, why did they think like this? Like this could have been like it shouldn't have been like this. Like because then you're kind of mixing there's a lot of convolution in there, and it's just like I don't want. It gives me anxiety sometimes looking at that. Like it really does. It's just like this is not how I would do this myself, and like I don't get it. And so, but it makes you a better programmer to kind of understand why they did that, and like I won't ever say that there's a wrong answer, but there's definitely a wrong approach sometimes, or a more tedious approach. That's a better word, a tedious approach. It's not wrong, it's just more tedious. It goes more work. There's more legwork to go through it. Absolutely. But yeah, I think for a lot of people that are like starting developing and just graduate from a boot camp, it's kind of just whatever you're not comfortable with, you should kind of lean into that a little bit more, because like that's where you're lacking the most skills, because you're like, you naturally kind of avoided that topic, like subconsciously. And a lot of times that is kind of, like for me, it was those topics. Like I did not like algorithms that much. Like I could write an algorithm, but I do not like writing algorithms. Like, I don't want to do like red length search all the time, right? I don't want to be doing binary. Like I don't need to be like, those aren't very applicable. Like in a real job, like it's not applicable. So I hate those kind of algorithm tests or like coding interviews, because it doesn't prove that you're a good programmer. It just proves you understand data structures and you can mess with them. But at the same time, like what company is using 6 different data structures, right? They're not really using like 6 different types. No one's using like a node list or a tree and just an array. Most of the time, everything is an array or an object that you're manipulating. So it's like, I have seen times where people might use node trees or hashes or stacks. I mean, stacks can be useful, but at the same time, it's like those are one-off cases instead of a very arbitrary kind of like grand scheme of things. So it's kind of one of those things. But if you are you're setting your goal to work for Google, Apple, Microsoft, you need to know data structures and algorithms like the back of your hand. And you also need to know, and my biggest tip is, because I did interview with Amazon once and I hated the interview. Not the interviewer or the company. I just didn't like that like the whole algorithm process, because like I solved it the most efficient way that I could. And then they asked me, how can this be more efficient? And then I just started blanking. I was like, well, I wrote it as efficient as I can. So like, and then I started thinking through the process, like, nope, that's as efficient as I can get. So like my little hint to people that are doing like algorithm data structure kind of interviews is leave a little gap for yourself. Make a little blunder where it's just like, hey, like I know I could make this go better. Like this is more efficient if I do it. If I just come back to it, because they're always going to ask you at the end of it. It's like, so like, do you see a better way to do this problem? And that's where you just kick in and be like, I know exactly what I'm doing. So like leave a tiny mistake that makes it less efficient. But then at the end, you come back and be like, and then you just flex on them. Be like, yeah, no, like we're going to bring this down.
Undersell yourself.
So, yeah,
Undersell
yeah,
yourself.
basically undersell like in the beginning, right? And then come in and be clutch, right? So that is like a big hit for me. Like I absolutely despise those kind of interviews, but like I am like relearning how to do like algorithm and like revamping my memory on data structures again, because like I was like, what if I purely made a project using hashes, right? So like I just like started thinking about that. I was like, what if though? It's like, what if I just went with stacks all throughout? It's like, and I was like, oh, that's just a mess. And like I would never really want to do that. But like it started making me think of all the different use cases, which is handy. But yeah, like if your goal, if you're watching this and you're listening to, or going to listen to the future or watch in the future, and your target is those big companies, it's like data structures and algorithm is a very key part. I think those are very basic things inside of computer science that boot camps kind of skip over, right? They don't hit on it enough. So like I think those are kind of topics that you kind of want to rehash and go through, and you should get a deep understanding of them and how they work and operate and what methods you can execute with them, because different data structures have different methods that you can use with, right? And so those are very important to kind of be cognizant about going through your program career. I also think like two big things that I think that boot camps should teach, but they don't teach, is recursion and polymorphism. And I hate polymorphism. Don't get me wrong. Like I don't have a shred of like empathy or sympathy for like learning that, but they are two topics that it's very handy for your understanding code. Like recursion definitely has really good solutions in cases, right? It's a very use case thing, but it's very handy, right? So like knowing those kind of things and topics really help you out. So like, and I think a lot of boot camps kind of miss that, is the data structure algorithm portion. They don't really teach you polymorphism, or they don't really go too deep into recursion. They give you basically a blueprint of, hey, you can create a web app on a very basic level. I wouldn't say basic either, on a very high level, right? But there is always a higher level you could take that up. And once you kind of dabble into those kind of topics, you'll soon figure out that, oh, why was I going through this entire list like this every single time? Recursion's there for you, right? Yeah. And it opens your eyes to different ways to solve problems. And so like that's like the whole thing of like those computer science topics that we don't cover, is they actually are very applicable in our lives as a programmer, because it shows you a new solution that's kind of more efficient if it fits. It's not always going to be the solution. So if you're hearing this and you're like, I'm going to use recursion next, it's not a every time use case. It's like a very like it depends on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to get at. Like I was flattening an object, and it was just a nested object, right? Because it was object inside an object inside an object. And that's when I used recursion, because I was just trying to flatten everything out. And so there's always use cases for it, right? Because I didn't want to go through, okay, then push this up, then push this up, then push this up. And so like it was very hectic, but like there's very use cases of it, and you can pull it out. And it's kind of one of those things that you can flex on to somebody later on. It's like, hey, like I did it this way. You ever think about it that way? And they're like, no. And then they like, you're very proud of yourself, and they just walk away. It's like, okay, I don't care.
Yeah.
But like that was like, I had that proud moment when I actually put recursion into my code and I pushed it up and it got merged. I was like, damn, Daniel, I did it.
That is a highlight moment, man. That's got a highlight moment. But you brought up a lot of good points there. I know we're a little bit over time, but I know this is gonna be recorded, but we're gonna have it live. But like you gave a lot of points I didn't even think about. But I wanted to see, like, do you have any other last minute like tips for upcoming bootcamp grads before we kind of like wrap this podcast up?
Yeah, so I have like 3 big tips, and what I kind of follow a lot is I don't watch YouTube tutorials. I used to, and I feel like a lot of bootcamp grads fall into the tutorial trap, where they're coding along with the tutorial. That is completely, it doesn't work your brain enough. It builds finger memory, but it doesn't build your like actual memory of how to code.
Sure.
like tutorials are great to show you, give you a template of, oh, this is how someone did it. So you should watch a tutorial. Don't code with the tutorial. Watch the tutorial, see how they're doing it, and then implement your own method. Because that's when you actually start realizing you can code, and you realize like how to code is you coding by yourself and not watching a tutorial. Second thing is, every single day after your boot camp, your classes or anything, like, yeah, you could be exhausted. Yeah, even on the weekends, right? Spend like 30 minutes, like it could be 30 minutes or an hour, however long you want to. But I would say like study or like work on a project small by small, because like little pebbles will end up making a beach, right? At the end of the time, right?
Absolutely.
So like it's the effort that you put in and day out. It's not the amount of effort. Like the amount of effort, I'm not talking about like, oh, like I'm gonna half-ass this. I'm talking about like the amount of time you're putting into it. So like you can literally code 10 minutes, and that's better than 0, right?
Yeah. Consistency.
Like, I'm not saying you should do it. Yeah, it's just like, and then you build on those. It's just a building block. So that's my second thing. Like and my last and third thing is just make time to do fun projects. Like you should not always, like if you are working on a project and you start losing interest, like finish that project off and do something fun, right? It doesn't have to be extravagant. Oh, it doesn't have to be like this is my resume, like main feature, my main project that I'm going to display out there. No, just make a fun project that you thoroughly enjoy, because during your interview with the people, that passion for that kind of project, it will show to them like, oh, he really enjoyed coding. He really enjoys like programming. And so like the more you're into your own projects, the more it shows when you talk about it to somebody. And like, yeah, there's a bunch of like, you could Google search a bunch of like great resume building portfolio, like projects. Yeah, those are great to have. Yeah, like it shows your idea of like knowing of how to code stuff, but like you should really just enjoy what you're coding, and that will later on show in your interviews. Because I feel like a lot of hard topics that like you discuss in interviews is very like, oh, like, so why did you do this project? Like, what does this all entail? Like, what are the technologies you use? But then like, if you're really into it, you'll be like, yeah, I use this to connect it to this. And you're answering questions before they ask, and it shows them like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. But if you're working on like projects and portfolio builders that like you find on the internet, you're not gonna have that kind of passion, and it's not gonna like click in your head of like, oh, this is like why I did this and why I did this, because you're just kind of like, it all kind of looks bad, because if you kind of do those kind of projects, you kind of look at tutorials too. Absolutely. I'm not gonna lie. You look at tutorials, you see how other people did it, and then you kind of build up. And so it's like, you're not going to remember every little aspect, but like fun projects, you will remember everything. So those are my biggest 3 tips for like new bootcamp grads is basically don't base your life off tutorials. Code every day. Doesn't matter the amount of time you put into it. It's just that you did it, right? And like that is an achievement. That's a win for the day. If you just code for even 10 minutes, that's a win. And then the third is work on fun projects, passion projects, right? So those, like, I think those 3 things will kind of drive you more, and like you'll learn more new technologies doing that way. Other, like if you go into a loophole of like tutorials and kind of working on like projects you find on the internet, you won't learn as much. You won't discover new technologies as much. Your innovation will kind of halt, and you can't really think out of the box, because a lot of the things that you kind of need for the programmers kind of think like, you shouldn't think like everybody else thinks, right? Like you should be finding your own solution to the problem and coming up with a good answer. And so it kind of goes through that process of like what you'll do day to day as a programmer. Like, and that's just kind of like figure out a solution to the problem in your way, not through Stack Overflow or YouTube tutorials, but like solutions that you think through your head. So those were my last 3, man.
Yeah, no, that's so awesome, man. I really appreciate you giving those feedback, because honestly, I really like I mean, we both come a long way, and then you've developed these habits and you realize what works and what doesn't work. And so you provide a lot of good resources to these people. And I don't know if you know, but Brian Gordon also went to our Flatiron School. I think you probably worked with him remotely. I'm not sure. He said he remembers you. I had a
Yeah,
conversation.
I remember.
Nice. Awesome. So yeah. But I thought those were amazing, really resources that you provided. And, you know, for the people that are going to watch in the future, definitely take advantage of what Ryan said. But that being said, Ryan, like, I appreciate your time. I know it's, what is it? 7:15 now over there.
Yeah.
But I appreciate your time. You know, you gave so much good information. I'm going to give you a big shout out here in a second, and you know, LinkedIn. So I appreciate so much. But we'll definitely need to like do this again, like bring you back, and then definitely keep me in the loop if any other ideas come to your head. You want to collaborate. I'm always in. But really, like, thank you so much for what you provided today, and we'll have to catch up once I'm back in Denver. So I'll be back in May. So if you're there, actually let me know. Actually, yeah, definitely let me know. But yeah, for the people that came here, I thank you so much. This is Every Tech Talk, episode 1, closing out with Ryan Choe. Definitely subscribe, more to come. But yeah, Ryan, thank you so much. Definitely see you here in a little bit, yeah, in the future.
Awesome. I appreciate you inviting me on the first episode. And yeah, I would love to be back. So you can hit me up anytime.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Well, have a good night, everyone. See ya. Bye.
Yeah.